The goal isn't to say, Nietzsche was right and SE is wrong, or vice versa. That completely misses the point. What we want to do is explore the nuances, the places where they seem to clash, but also importantly, the potential for SE to become even better, even more refined when you look at it through Nietzsche's eyes. It's about getting that multi-perspectival understanding.
A special shout out to Lisa. Lisa, thanks for the fantastic tip you suggested we check out the Philosophize This podcast. And honestly, that's what sparked this whole investigation.
Yeah, that was a great find.
Totally. And also, we have to give a massive nod to the research tools we used. Specifically, ChatGPT 4o with web search enabled. I mean, that's where we got all this incredibly detailed analysis, these really insightful breakdowns we're about to unpack. It's pretty amazing how these cutting-edge tools let us get such thorough insights so quickly on topics this complex.
It really speeds things up, helps synthesize a lot of material.
For sure. So just to set the stage quickly for those maybe less familiar with one or both of these, on one hand, we have Street Epistemology. We'll probably just call it SE most of the time. Think of it like philosophical detective work, often done out in public, talking to people. The focus isn't just on what people believe, but crucially, how they got there. How do they justify it? What's the basis for their confidence?
It's about the process.
Exactly. It's about asking these probing, usually non-confrontational questions to explore the reasoning, especially behind those really deeply held beliefs, ethics, religion, politics, that sort of thing. It's less about debating the belief itself.
Right. It's not about winning an argument.
No, it's more about examining the process of how that belief was formed and how it's maintained.
And then on the other side, looming large, you've got Friedrich Nietzsche. I mean, what can you say? A foundational figure, almost like an earthquake in Western philosophy. He's famous for these fierce critiques of traditional morality, of the whole idea of objective truth itself. And of course, his concept of the will to power.
Such a big concept.
Huge. He didn't just question things, he radically reevaluated everything. He pushed people to look beyond the surface, beyond inherited values, to understand the deeper, often hidden drives behind human thought and action. He wasn't that interested in whether a belief was true in some objective scientific sense.
Right.
He was much more interested in why we hold it. What purpose does it serve for us? What values does it express? What's it doing for the person?
So, okay, our mission for this deep dive. Let's distill the absolute key takeaways from the analysis we have. Give you that intellectual shortcut, make you genuinely well-informed on this, honestly, pretty unexpected intersection. Get ready for some surprises, some connections you might not have seen coming. And I promise, probably a few aha moments along the way, because how these two interact, it really could change how you think about your own beliefs, and maybe even more powerfully, how you talk to other people.
Totally agree. And just to reiterate, the goal isn't to say, Nietzsche was right and SE is wrong, or vice versa. That completely misses the point. What we want to do is explore the nuances, the places where they seem to clash, but also importantly, the potential for SE to become even better, even more refined when you look at it through Nietzsche's eyes. It's about getting that multi-perspectival understanding, which ironically is a very Nietzschean thing to aim for in itself. The initial encounter, Nietzsche's view on SE's core principles.
All right, let's imagine this first encounter. You introduce Nietzsche, Mr. Question Everything, to Street Epistemology. What's his initial reaction? Well, surprisingly perhaps, he'd probably find quite a bit to like, at least at first. That core SE practice, the relentless asking of how do you know that? To really get at the underlying confidence, the reasoning, or maybe the lack of reasoning, he'd likely appreciate that digging beneath the surface.
Oh, absolutely. What's really fascinating here is that Nietzsche himself was, a master of that kind of deep questioning. He didn't call it SE, obviously, but his method, it was basically what he called a genealogical critique. Think of it like being a historical detective. You're not just asking what happened, you're asking what were the hidden motives, the values, the power dynamics, the historical accidents that led to this specific belief or this specific event being seen as true or good. You see it super clearly in his book, Beyond Good and Evil. He traces things we take for granted, especially moral truths, back to their origins. And often, those origins, they're not rational at all. They're tied up in, moral prejudices, historical quirks, power struggles.
So not objective reality discovered through pure reason.
Not at all. So from that viewpoint, Nietzsche would definitely admire SE's basic impulse. Challenging dogma, digging under the surface of common sense or what everyone just assumes is obviously true. He'd respect that skeptical energy.
Yeah, I can almost picture him, maybe standing in a park, watching an SE conversation.
Leaning against a tree, maybe.
Yeah. And just nodding along as the SE person patiently asks, "But how do you know? What's the actual basis for feeling 90% certain about that?"
Yeah.
That refusal to just accept the first answer, that constant push for the foundation, that feels very Nietzschean in spirit. It's
Yeah.
about dismantling comfortable illusions.
It totally is. He'd see SE at its best as a potentially powerful tool, almost therapeutic in a way. A tool for dismantling those cozy, inherited beliefs that people cling to without ever really examining why. For Nietzsche, real intellectual freedom, becoming that stronger individual he called the Übermensch, requires exactly that kind of radical self-questioning, reevaluating everything. And SE, in its ideal form, offers a kind of system for doing that, encouraging people to really confront the roots of their own convictions.
Okay, so there's initial appreciation,
Yeah.
a shared love for digging deep, for questioning assumptions, but you can feel the but coming, right? This is where the philosophical friction really starts to build. Because while SE wants to know how you know something, it often seems to operate on an assumption, an underlying assumption that there is some kind of objective truth out there that we can potentially discover through better reasoning or evidence.
And this brings up a massive point of contention, doesn't it? It's absolutely central. SE, in practice, often works with this implicit idea. Truth is discoverable. If we just reason more clearly, if we're more logically consistent, if we lean on objective standards like, say, the scientific method, we can get closer to a universal understanding of how things really are. But Nietzsche, he would fundamentally reject that entire premise. He'd argue that even those supposedly objective standards, they are just interpretations themselves. They're deeply shaped by hidden values, by the specific historical moment we're in, by power dynamics we often don't even see. Remember his phrase, immaculate perception? He used that in Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Right, to mock the idea.
Exactly. To ridicule the idea that we could ever have pure, unbiased knowledge, totally free from interpretation. It's like thinking you could look at the world without any lenses on. Nietzsche says no, we always have lenses, colored by our experiences, our drives, our culture. There's just no view from nowhere.
So let's make that concrete. Imagine an SE practitioner focusing on scientific evidence for a belief, trying to ground it objectively. Nietzsche steps in and asks,
He'd ask, probably with a bit of irony, whose science are we talking about here? What values went into shaping that specific scientific method? What assumptions are already baked into the very idea of evidence you're using? It's like he's constantly pulling the rug out from under the belief that we can reach some perfectly neutral, universally agreed upon truth that stands above all perspectives.
okay, so no objective truth in that sense. It's all interpretation. And this ties into his concept of the will to power, doesn't it?
Absolutely. From Nietzsche, every knowledge claim, every way we understand the world, is fundamentally an expression of the will to power. And let's be really clear about what that means because it's easily misunderstood. It's not necessarily some crude lust for dominating others.
Right, it's more subtle.
Much more fundamental. It's this basic inherent drive in all living things, this urge to grow, overcome obstacles, interpret, organize, make sense of things, impose meaning on the chaos of experience. So when you claim to know something, when you hold a belief, that very act is an expression of your will to power, your will to shape reality through your interpretation, to define your world, maybe even to influence how others see it. So what we often call truth is simply what is useful for a particular perspective, a particular will in a particular situation.
Wow, okay. And this leads directly to maybe the most challenging, but also maybe the most important warning Nietzsche would have for anyone doing street epistemology. Even when you're trying to be neutral, helpful, open, you're still exerting some kind of power, some kind of influence. It's unavoidable from his perspective.
Yeah, SE practitioners often aim for neutrality, and that's commendable. They try to be facilitators, not debaters. But Nietzsche would step back and say, look, the very act of engaging someone in this intense questioning of their core beliefs, even if your intentions are purely helpful, that reflects the questioner's own will to influence. It's not necessarily sinister, like you said, but it's a force. It's present in any interaction where one person is guiding another's thinking, framing the conversation, setting the terms of the inquiry.
So the SE person asks, how confident are you? Or what evidence do you have? And Nietzsche might jump in and ask, and why are you asking that specific question? What's your goal here? What values are embedded in your method of questioning? It's like a metacritique, turning the spotlight back on the questioner.
Precisely. The whole structure of a typical SE dialogue, often moving someone from certainty towards doubt, or towards a different kind of understanding, can be seen as a subtle imposition. You're imposing a specific intellectual framework, one that values evidence and logical consistency in a particular way, perhaps over other ways of knowing, like intuition or tradition. Even claiming neutrality, Nietzsche would argue, can mask underlying values, maybe a preference for secularism or rationalism or individualism, that desire to guide thought in a certain direction. That itself is an expression of the practitioner's will to power, their will to shape understanding.
Okay, this is heavy stuff. It really makes you think. So, if we take these Nietzschean critiques seriously, and they're hard to ignore once you hear them, what does it mean for actually doing street epistemology? How can the practice evolve? How can it refine itself using these insights without, losing its core value or just collapsing into self-doubt?
Subscribing is the only way to keep the cows from learning TikTok dances? Oh my God.
The stakes have been raised.
I know, it's like we have to save the world.
Yeah, we have to protect the internet.
From dancing cows. Refining street epistemology through a Nietzschean lens.
Well, I think the first big refinement, maybe the most fundamental one, is to really consciously embody perspectivism in the way questions are asked. Since Nietzsche hammers home this idea of no view from nowhere, that all knowledge is tied to a perspective, SE needs to shift. Shift away from implicitly chasing some objective truth.
Of course.
Towards explicitly acknowledging that all understanding is subjective, interpretive. It's bound by the individual's perspective.
So instead of just that blunt, how do you know this? Which can sound a bit like an accusation.
Well, it can put people on the defensive.
You'd phrase it differently.
From your perspective, what experiences or reasons led you to this belief? Or, like the example dialogue in our source material. I appreciate you sharing that certainty from your personal experience. What shaped that feeling? See how that immediately acknowledges subjectivity. It validates their lived experience as the starting point, rather than implying there's some external universal standard they need to meet.
Yeah, it instantly feels different. Less like a cross-examination, more like trying to understand their world from the inside.
Exactly. It moves the focus from fact-checking towards worldview understanding. It opens the door for a more genuine dialogue, not an implicit debate about who's objectively right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's less confrontational. And you mentioned earlier, Nietzsche wasn't just interested in the what or how of belief, but the deeper why, not just the logical reasons, but the underlying motivations.
Yes, precisely. Nietzsche argued beliefs aren't just cool, rational conclusions. They often express deeper drives that will to power, again, fulfilling needs or desires. So a refined SE would actively look for these motivations, move beyond just factual claims. Ask questions like, how did this belief connect to your identity? Does it give you a sense of belonging, comfort, control? Does it serve a purpose in your life?
So the practitioner might shift from asking for evidence to something like, it sounds like holding belief X gives you a real sense of confidence. Or maybe it connects you strongly to your community. Have you noticed that connection yourself?
That's a huge shift. You're not just asking for proof anymore. You're asking about the belief's function, its utility in that person's actual life. Because that utility for Nietzsche is often where the truth or the real value of the belief lies for that individual. A belief is true for them if it helps them navigate their world, if it helps their particular will thrive. And this naturally leads to the really tricky part.
The self-reflection part, turning the lens back on the practitioner.
Bingo. That uncomfortable but absolutely essential step. Remember Nietzsche's warning? Claiming neutrality often hides your own values and biases. So the SE practitioner needs to grapple with that. How do you do that without just freezing up?
Yeah, how do you stay effective?
It's about intellectual honesty, cultivating self-awareness, and then being transparent about it. Acknowledge your own potential influence. This isn't about beating yourself up. It's about balancing the power dynamic inherent in the conversation. So a practitioner might actually say something like, look, when I ask these questions, my goal is understanding, not imposing my views. But I know that any method, including this one, comes from a certain my perspective. Does this approach feel fair to you? Does it feel like genuine exploration, or am I maybe pushing things without realizing it?
Wow, that's really direct. But I can see how it builds trust. You're acknowledging the will to influence that Nietzsche talked about. You're putting your cards on the table.
It addresses it head on. It invites collaboration and makes the process more transparent, more ethical. And that transparency naturally extends to understanding the belief's history too. Not just what it is now, but how it developed. This is where adopting what we call genealogical skepticism comes in. Nietzsche didn't just want to debunk ideas. He wanted to trace them back to their moral, emotional, historical roots. So a refined SE wouldn't just ask for current justifications. It would explore the when and how. When did you start believing this? What was going on in your life or in the world at that time? How did your context, family, culture, experiences shape this belief? This brings out the personal history, showing the belief as something that grew and evolved, not just a static fact you suddenly grasped.
So instead of what's your evidence, maybe it's more like, can you remember when you first encountered this idea or when it started to feel true for you? What was that like? How did your surroundings influence that?
Yes, it shifts the whole conversation. It becomes more narrative, more personal, less about abstract logic right away. It recognizes that beliefs are woven into our lives, our identities. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. If we're moving away from this idea of finding the one objective, universal truth, then what is the ultimate goal of doing SE? What's the point?
Well, you mentioned Nietzsche saw his own critique of truth as a kind of therapeutic practice, like freeing ourselves from illusions that might be holding us back. So is the goal of this refined SE less about proving beliefs wrong, more about personal growth, self-discovery?
I think that's exactly it. From a Nietzschean viewpoint, SE should position itself not as the highway to absolute truth, but as a powerful tool for self-examination, for empowering the individual. It's about helping someone reflect. Does this belief still serve me in my life right now? Does it align with who I am becoming, with my goals, my values? The focus shifts from external validation, is it objectively right, to internal utility and coherence. Does it work for me? Is it helpful? Is it authentic? A practitioner embodying this might say something towards the end like, so we haven't been trying to definitively prove this belief right or wrong in some grand sense. The goal was more to explore it together so you can evaluate if it still serves you, if it gives you strength, if it helps you make sense of your world in a way that feels right for you now.
That completely reframes the interaction. It's entirely focused on their internal landscape, their journey, their lived reality, not some abstract benchmark. Okay, this is getting really concrete, and I think seeing it in action would make it even clearer. Let's look at those before and after dialogues.
From theory to practice, before and after the Nietzschean refinement.
All right, to really see the difference this Nietzschean critique makes, let's compare two dialogues from our source material. First, the before, a more traditional, let's call it pre-Nietzschean critique approach to SE, focused on clarity, evidence, certainty levels. Here's how that conversation might unfold.
So why do you believe in X?
Well, it just feels right. I've always felt this way.
Okay. On a scale of 0 to 100, how certain would you say you are?
Probably about 90%.
90%. Okay. What evidence or reasoning do you have that supports that level of confidence?
Well, it's more of a personal insight, really. I just kind of know.
I see. Do you ever have moments of doubt about it?
No, not really.
Okay. So is there anything that could potentially change your mind about X?
I guess if I saw definitive proof that it was false.
Okay, now let's put on our Nietzschean glasses and look closely at that exchange. What assumptions are lurking beneath the surface? First, you definitely see that neutrality assumption we talked about. The practitioner's questions sound impartial, almost like a survey.
Like they're just collating data.
Exactly. There's no acknowledgement that the very act of asking these specific questions, focusing on certainty scales and evidence, is itself shaping the conversation, guiding it down a particular path based on the practitioner's own values about what constitutes good reasoning. It implicitly treats the method as a neutral tool. Second, the objective truth framing is really strong. Questions like, what evidence supports that? And what could change your mind? Heavily imply that there's an external, objective standard proof against which the belief should be measured. It pushes the interlocutor towards seeking verifiable external validation, which is exactly the kind of immaculate perception or view from nowhere that Nietzsche found so problematic. The idea that proof exists independently of interpretation is assumed.
Yeah, the focus is all outward, on external validation.
Right. Third, notice the limited depth. It asks about the level of certainty and the type of justification, personal insight versus evidence. But it doesn't really dig into why this belief matters to the person. There's no exploration of its origins, the genealogical aspect, or its function in their life, the will to power aspect. Why is feeling right so powerful for them? What does that 90% certainty do for them? It stays pretty much on the surface level of logic and evidence claims.
It doesn't get into the serves your part at all.
Not really. And that leads to the fourth point. The missing therapeutic value. The conversation isn't framed as a journey of self-discovery or personal growth for the interlocutor. It feels more like an intellectual audit, maybe even a subtle challenge. The implied goal seems to be getting them to question their belief based on a lack of external evidence, rather than helping them understand how that belief operates within their own life, their identity, their needs. It's about epistemic justification, not necessarily personal meaning or utility.
Okay, that critique makes the limitations of the first approach pretty clear. So how does it change when you infuse it with these Nietzschean insights? Let's unpack that after dialogue. I think the shifts will be really apparent. All right, here's a refined Nietzsche-inspired version. Your journey to deeper understanding starts here. NavigatingBeliefs.com. Sign up. It's free.
So it's not just learning, it's an adventure.
Yeah, like a quest for knowledge.
I'm really curious. Why does this belief feel right for you personally? Okay, right away, you hear that perspectivism, right?
Well, it just fits with how I've seen the world since I was a kid, really. And boom, there's the opening for genealogy.
That's interesting. How do you think your background, maybe your upbringing or early experiences, shaped that feeling of it being right, that certainty?
Well, my family always stressed it. It was really important in our community. So, yeah, it's definitely tied to feeling like I belong.
Okay, now we're touching on the will to power belief serving a function.
Okay, so it sounds like belief X isn't just an idea you hold. It's deeply connected to your sense of identity, who you are and where you belong, like an anchor.
Yes, that's it exactly. It feels like a fact, sure, but it's also just part of me. Got it. You know, in street epistemology theory, we often talk about being aware of our own biases. So just to be transparent here, my intention in asking these questions is genuinely to explore how this belief works for you in your experience. It's not about challenging you. But I also need to acknowledge that this method itself, this whole way of questioning, it comes from my own perspective, my own worldview. How does this approach feel to you? Does it feel fair, like we're exploring together? There's that direct questioning of neutrality.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. It feels fair.
Great. So Nietzsche, as we've been touching on, really emphasized that there aren't really pure facts out there, only interpretations shaped by our drives, our will. Thinking about it that way, how would you say this belief serves you? What does it do for you? Does it maybe give you confidence, connection, a sense of control? Okay, the question about how it serves them. Can you elaborate again how that connects directly to the will to power idea?
Control, definitely. It makes me feel more secure knowing that.
Okay, that makes sense. So understanding that it provides that crucial sense of security and control for you, could we maybe think about belief X less as a kind of universal, absolute truth for everyone, everywhere, and more as a really powerful worldview, a lens that genuinely works for you right now? And if we see it that way, what kind of circumstances, maybe new experiences or changes in your life might prompt you to perhaps adjust or revise that worldview even a little? Big shift there towards therapeutic praxis and reinforcing perspectivism.
Huh. That's a different way to think about it.
Yeah.
Maybe if my social situation changed drastically, like if I moved to a completely different culture where that belief wasn't shared, my sense of security might need to come from somewhere else. I might rethink it then.
Okay. So in that sense, the belief is incredibly true and useful for you in your current context, providing that security, but maybe not absolute in all possible contexts. That's a fantastic illustration of perspectivism, actually, reflecting Nietzsche's idea that truth is often about utility, about what works, deeply tied to a specific context and serving a particular need or will.
Okay, let's break down exactly what happened there. That shift you asked about, connecting serves you to will to power. It's crucial. When the practitioner asks, how does this belief serve you, giving you confidence, connection, or control? They're directly probing the utility of the belief for the individual's fundamental drives, which is the core of Nietzsche's will to power concept in this personal context. It's not just about logical consistency. It's about how the belief helps the person affirm themselves, organize their world, feel secure, connect with others, essentially, how it empowers their will to navigate and find meaning in life. Finding that the belief provides control and security reveals its deep connection to the interlocutor's fundamental need to structure their reality and feel grounded within it. That is the will to power expressing itself through belief.
Got it. So the belief isn't just inner information, it's actively doing something for their sense of self and their place in the world.
Precisely. And let's quickly recap the other shifts we saw. Perspectivism was right there from the start. Why does this feel right for you personally? Framed immediately as subjective. Transparency about neutrality was explicit. The practitioner owned their perspective and method, asking if it felt fair. That builds huge trust. Genealogical skepticism came in naturally, exploring the childhood roots, the family influence, the connection to belonging, tracing the belief's origins, and the whole conversation shifted towards therapeutic framing, seeing the belief as a worldview that works for you, exploring conditions for revision, focusing on self-awareness and utility rather than objective proof. It became a collaborative exploration of the belief's role in the interlocutor's life.
It's just a fundamentally different kind of conversation, deeper, more respectful, more insightful, it seems. So let's synthesize this. Why do these shifts, taken together, matter so much? What are the big takeaways, the practical benefits of bringing Nietzsche into the SE fold?
The benefits really ripple outwards. First, you get more authentic dialogue. By dropping the pretense of a purely objective stance and embracing subjectivity, the conversation feels more genuine, more human. It honors the other person's reality.
Less like a test.
Exactly. Second, it deepens insight dramatically. By exploring the will to power behind beliefs, the emotional, social, existential functions, you understand why a belief is held so strongly, not just whether it seems logical on the surface. You get to the roots. Third, it balances power dynamics. When the practitioner acknowledges their own influence and perspective, it reduces that feeling of being subtly manipulated or judged. It fosters trust and makes the interlocutor feel safer, more like an equal partner in the exploration.
That feels really important ethically.
It is. Fourth, it brings SE into better alignment with a more sophisticated understanding of knowledge, echoing Nietzsche. It accepts that truth is complex, often perspectival, often about utility and context rather than some simple absolute fact waiting to be found. And finally, maybe the most crucial benefit. It empowers genuine change and growth. By focusing on self-reflection and the belief's utility for the person, it opens a path for meaningful personal evolution. It's not about tearing down their worldview, but helping them assess if it still fits, if it still serves them. It becomes a tool for self-understanding and maybe even self-transformation, which is incredibly empowering.
This is really valuable stuff. And for you, listening right now, this isn't just abstract philosophy. Whether you ever formally practice SE or not, these insights are powerful. They can help you navigate conversations with anyone, friends, family, colleagues, with more nuance, more empathy. And maybe just as importantly, they help you understand your own beliefs. Why do you believe what you believe? What function does it serve? It gives you a richer toolkit for critical thinking about the world and about yourself. Outro. And that brings us towards the end of this, well, really rich deep dive today. We started wondering if Nietzsche's radical skepticism and street epistemology's systematic questioning could even occupy the same space. And what we found is not just that they can coexist, but that Nietzsche offers this incredible pathway to refine SE, to make it deeper, more self-aware, and honestly, probably more effective. We went from his initial, perhaps surprising appreciation for SE's questioning spirit through his really tough critiques about objective truth and the will to power, and landed on how those critiques can transform the practice.
Absolutely. And the point, again, isn't to say SE was wrong before. It's about pushing it to evolve towards that kind of rigorous self-critique that Nietzsche himself embodied. By consciously embracing perspectivism, acknowledging power dynamics, digging into the genealogy of beliefs, and framing the whole thing as more of a therapeutic exploration. SE becomes, I think, a much more robust, insightful, and ethically sound way to engage with the incredibly complex reality of human belief. It honors the whole person, not just their logical arguments.
So as we wrap up, here's something for you to take away and really chew on, a final thought. If we accept Nietzsche's challenge, if maybe all truth is perspectival, always viewed through our own unique lens, and if even our best methods for seeking truth are themselves expressions of our own will, our own values, how does that challenge your most deeply held beliefs, the things you feel most certain about? And maybe more practically, how might it change the way you approach conversations where beliefs differ, how you try to understand others or even yourself?
And to build on that, just one more layer to consider. If the goal shifts, if it's not solely about finding the objective truth, but more about understanding how beliefs function, what they do for us, what needs they meet, what drives they express, how does that change things? How might that shift in focus alter the way you engage in any dialogue? With a stranger, sure, but also with people you know well. Or even just in the quiet conversations you have inside your own head. It's the kind of question that doesn't really have a final answer, but asking it can change everything.
Really makes you think. Powerful stuff indeed.
It was a fascinating journey. Thanks for exploring it.